Okay.
Right.
So she gets out here to Fort Vancouver, and just like the last 2 times, it's not done. It's not done. They screwed up.
No.
Now, if any other nun but her would have got off that boat, they would have got back on the boat, and that would have been it. And then they would have said, you're on your own, Oregon. She just, like, took a sigh and was like, yeah, well, here we go again. So she marches over to the Hudson Bay Company, which is doing, all the founding of Vancouver and the fort over there. And she sees good wood on some of the old buildings they're not using. She says, hey, we're supposed to be here. You called for us. We showed up. You're supposed to have our stuff done. It's not done. Can I at least have the wood so I can, build a place to sleep? And they're like, yeah, of course. So she literally physically dismantles boards and hauls them over to, she's like, can I have this land? They give her a plot of land. Yeah, you can build your church and build your, we're sorry, it's not ready. Okay, so she chews them out and goes and gets the wood and builds her own place, and so we're off. So they're camped at an old barracks that first night, and, they're trying to be good-spirited about it, and everything was fine, and, they're grumbling, and everything's terrible, and in the debris of this old, crappy cabin that they've just been given, she finds an embroidered piece of cloth that has the Sacred Heart on it.
Oh, wow.
So immediately that starts her on her wave of synchronicities of, I'm supposed to be in Oregon, and she starts down what she calls God's divine providence. And she literally starts living her life based on messages from God. Now, you could see this as a message from God, or you could see this as a synchronicity. It kind of depends on whatever lens that you're going to look through. So she starts to mentor men, because she can't buy land. She can't buy land as a man or a woman back then. So she makes friends with a local bishop and runs around with his nephew, who eventually becomes a bishop later as well, calls him Little Eddie. Who calls a bishop Little Eddie and gets away with it, right? Well, she's 6 feet tall, so that tells you that he's not as tall as she is. Well, Little Eddie becomes really interesting later, because not only did she create his vestments for his, canonization when he became the bishop, he presided over her funeral in the church he helped build. And then later, when he was disinterred in the 1950s, when they moved the diocese, his corpse came out and it was incorrupt.
Really? Wow.
All the other dudes in that church crypt were mush, but not Little Eddie. So again, what is going on, okay?
Right.
So she's running around with him and having him buy the land for her and then turn around and give it to her for $1 because she can't buy this land.
Right.
So she has this pattern where the land that she buys for the Providence Academy, she decides that she wants. She buys this plot of land, and it turns out that it is the largest naturally occurring slab of basalt in the entire area, which means if there's a gigantic earthquake, her buildings will probably stand if everything else falls. It depends on how big it is. How would she have known? Okay.
Right.
Then she's building her chapel, and she had such a forceful personality that whenever she saw a sign of her God, she just did what she wanted and assumed that God would protect her and sort it out later. So she's building her chapel, and one of the nuns under her care is sent this painting of Christ with the Sacred Heart holding a lamb that's meant for the St. Vincent's Hospital in Portland that she's also building. She sees it as a sign of God because she needs a Sacred Heart painting for her church, because she promised a Sacred Heart on the way out that if she survived that she would, do something for the Sacred Heart. So she flat out jacks this painting from the hospital. She takes it, and she basically writes a letter and is like, yeah, well, God said I could have the painting, so if you really want to go against God, you can come and take it from me. Like, okay, so this is the kind of woman that she is. Again and again and again. She gets these signs, and then she does what she wants to do. And there's this big flood that threatens her whole farm, and so she goes and she cuts down a piece of wood from a tree and carves it into St. Joseph, plants it in the ground, and says, go no further to the water, and the water doesn't move. And again and again and again, there's all these stories of, oh, yeah, just roll with it. Nobody tells her, you know how she is, just let her go. Yeah. Just let her go. She was so terrible at getting along with other people and being a mother superior that they didn't let her be a mother superior after you. They're like, you're terrible at this, go out and build instead. So she's building, and she's doing these things on these trips, like she's fighting cougars, fighting bears, saved another nun from drowning, outwitting robbers, like all of this crazy stuff. So this is who asked this guy to make these bricks. So understanding her energy, it's like, okay, that's clearly contributing to something that's going on with these bricks.
Right.
They're intense. She's totally fearless, feels unworthy, has massive case of imposter syndrome, but just goes along this path from God. So Hidden's name, hidden, the word hidden is a whole thing in Masonic sort of ritual because the word occult has such a negative connotation with it. So they use the word esoteric instead.
Okay.
But it basically means hidden symbols, hidden knowledge, whatever. Because she did not speak English except for curse words that she learned from her, she worked alongside. Can you imagine? A nun, just like cursing her butt off.
I love it.
I know, I love her. Like, what is she even doing? So I checked into it to make sure that if she recognized the name Hidden, because as one of her God signs, I'm like, well, she must have seen that as a sign. But taking into the account the French translation, would it still have been there? Because she gave him a book and approached him about making bricks. So someone had to have taught the Parasos, a Catholic family, how to make bricks. Even though Masons and Catholics weren't supposed to be playing together. Like, you could get excommunicated for this. This is a big deal back then.
Yeah.
So did she recognize him? Did she recognize his name as being a sign? Possibly.
Right.
Possibly. So you go back to the building of the academy, and it's done in 1873. And she's driven him crazy the whole time that they've been building it because she literally inspects every brick. Every brick. They can't be overcooked. They can't be the wrong color. They can't be warped. Like, they have to be perfect. So this is kind of where the rumor of the cursed bricks starts, okay? They did have a disagreement at some point down the line about another one of the buildings that she built. And she used another brick company for that building and then went back to Hidden. So they obviously patched it up at some point. So if you examine this building that she built, and she built it with her own hands, it's the only one that's remaining that's verified she actually was side by side with the Masons building this. And it was her crowning achievement, her school, her orphanage. You think about the haunting, okay? Well, the first place I started was the 15th and Main, Hidden Brick Company. There's a building there now called the Brick House at the Bar and Grill. It's supposed to be haunted. I have several musician friends that have had gigs there and had just normal kind of very mild, hear footsteps, noises, stuff that isn't there stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things I found out about LM Hidden and subsequent Hiddens is LM had a very close friend that was a severe alcoholic. So he became very anti-liquor. And in none of the Hidden establishments, even the Columbia Hotel, which is probably part of the reason why it failed, alcohol was not allowed.
Okay.
So now the old brickyard is a bar. Okay.
Wow.
So maybe the voices and the general kind of feeling of, unwelcomeness in there that some of my musician friends are saying is simply because they're not liking the booze being slung.
Right.
That doesn't sound like a creepy, scary haunting. Next place I went was called the Urban Barn House, which was part of the Hidden plot there. And out of all of the locations I've been to, it's the only one that I beat it. I was in and I was out in like 2 minutes. I still don't know why. I don't know what happened in that building. There's nothing creepy in that building. They're selling CBD and pillows and tea and everything should be fine. But I wanted nothing to do with that building and I was out. Wow. So that one just didn't feel right. And I've dug into the history of that particular area. Like, did somebody die here? Did some accident happen? Because it just feels edgy. And and Dave felt the same way too. My husband, we were just like, we're out. So we started at the Historical Museum, digging into the Academy building. And the Carnegie Library is what is the Historical Museum now. It's part of that same Hidden plot that it was 13th to 19th and Main was his whole original land that he bought from actually Hayden, owner of Hayden Island, right? It all coming back around again, right?
Yes.
So he bought the land from Hayden. That whole plot is where they dug out the first hidden bricks from the ones between 1871 and 1904. The oldies came from there. He built the Carnegie Library, which is now the Historical Museum. There's still a library in the basement because there was a stipulation that said that there always needed to be a library in that building. And if that was the case, he would donate the building and the land to the city.
Oh, wow.
So that library is haunted. The basement is where the activity is. It doesn't feel negative, but you definitely feel like you're being watched when you're there. I had permission to be down there for quite a bit, and did a bunch of recording sessions, and nothing really happened. But it does feel very vibey. Stories from there range from people banging on pipes, a little boy is seen laughing, running, giggling, zipping around the corner, and an old man in period clothing is sort of vanishing into the bathroom wall. So I haven't had a personal experience in there, but that building is also supposed to be pretty juiced. It also has a secret door in the basement that no one can account for, not even the people that own it or the historical museum. There's a door that's boarded up, and they actually, when they redid the floor, they pulled everything out from the door to see where it would go, and it literally would go to nowhere. It walks out onto the lawn. What would be the lawn? But there's bricks in front. So there's like a small room / hidden door that just goes right out. And it's still very mysterious.
Yeah.
So that's odd. So a lot of these buildings have really hidden features like that. The Academy also has tunnels underneath that not everybody knows about.
Okay.
So that building is very strange. When I'm in that building, I take a picture of a random shelf. Just I'm taking pictures as I'm investigating, getting like random vibes. What's it like? What's it look like down here? You know, I have it all to myself. No one's going to bug me. And I took a picture of a random shelf, which happened to just be a bunch of books. A bunch of them happened to be about Mother Joseph. I hadn't even thought about her at this point.
And this was back at the library that you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
the Carnegie Library. I hadn't even been in the Academy yet. I was just found the brick, found out about hidden, and found out that the Historical Museum was made of hidden brick, and that they had a whole exhibit, a hidden brick exhibit in that museum, which had some of the old equipment. It had a brick mold, and so I started there because I was like, okay, I got to go start with the bricks. And when I'm there, that's the first kind of hint that I get that the Academy is really important and that the nuns are really important. I'm still not down the nun road yet. Then I start to really get into the Academy after that, because I realize the Academy is really important. And I start looking into this nun and realize, you know, her background is way more interesting than any other nun I've ever read about. So I'm so stoked to get inside the Providence Academy. And I'm like, this is going to be it. This is going to be it. So I've been outside the Academy that I've never been in before. And this is the first week of February we get inside for our tour. Everything's shut down, of course.
Right.
And like, it's awesome. I'm a kid at a candy store. Like, I cannot get enough of this building. And our docent that was giving us a tour was the last graduating class from that school. So I'm just like, you know, like asking all these questions. And she loves that I'm asking all these questions, and she knows everything. And we stayed and talked for like 30 minutes after the official tour, just you know, her telling me, read this book, read it, you know what I mean? So that's when the nun stuff really gets started. We go into the chapel, and I knew there was a chapel in the building. But again, I have a strong emotional reaction to this chapel. Like, I'm like, like I feel emotional. And again, why? I've been in a million Catholic churches. Who cares? You know, I'm not into this stuff, but I'm into this chapel. So I've got my camera, and I'm getting up really close to this hand-carved altar. And I asked, you know, the tour guide, I'm like, Carolyn, tell me about this altar. And she's like, oh, she carved it. And I'm like, wow. And I'm taking, you know, pictures of the details, whatever. And she's like, yeah, it took 3 years and yada, yada, yada. And she can tell, like, I'm so into this. So she looks at me and she's like, you can gently touch it if you want. It's allowed.
Oh,
and so
wow.
I'm touching this, and I'm just like, so I march in, and I go and I sit in the front pew of this chapel. And then she starts her spiel after we all walk around and look, and then she starts explaining it, you know, because she knew I wouldn't listen when we first walked in there, because we all just immediately were like bullets out of a gun looking, you know, going for whatever it was that drew us. And I went right to the altar. So I'm sitting in this pew, and turns out the first 6 rows in this church were ones that were hand carved by her, and that's one of the ones I picked. Okay, that's cool, whatever.
Oh, wow.
So I'm at this point, to be honest, she's kind of droning along, and I have crazy ADHD, and so I kind of start zoning out, and I'm like, I got to pay attention. But I brought my oracle deck with me, one of my oracle decks, my Liminal Earth oracle deck. Liminal Earth is an organization that I'm part of. I'm one of their ambassadors. I'm a terrible ambassador, but they love me anyway. Go to liminal.earth if you're into weird stuff. They have a whole map where you can, you know, submit any weirdness that's ever happened to you. Anyway, so I've got my oracle deck out. And I like that deck because it has very innocuous kind of symbols. It doesn't like make people freak out like tarot cards do.
Right.
So I just pull a couple of cards in church. And I'm looking over at Dave. And I feel like I did when I was a little kid and I was in trouble at church. You know, me and my grandpa would always get in trouble for goofing off in church, and my grandma would look over it was both. So I pull these cards, and there's a choir loft. There's 2 levels of, there's a choir loft and then a further loft where the sick people were wheeled out so they could go to church too. Mm-hmm. And I hear squeaky footsteps. Now I know what these footsteps taste like, sound like, might taste like, who knows, if you have to Cynthia, what they sound like, because I've been walking around this building for, you know, an hour, and It's very distinctive squeak because of the way the floors are put together. The wood joins together, and they're vintage and they're original, and the way that they've settled, and they're beautiful. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, it's probably the floor settling. So then I pull a second card, and then I heard, and I asked David, did you hear footsteps? And he said, mm-hmm. So I pull another card, and 5. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they came from that first choir loft. So I immediately turned around and took a picture. And there was nothing there, of course. But I was like, somebody knows I'm misbehaving in church and I'm in trouble. And we just sort of like kind of were laughing. Okay, whatever. So Carolyn, the docent, and I had talked about when we got there. It's like, so this place is supposed to be haunted, right? Because of some curse on the bricks, right? That's a bunch of crap, right? And she's like, yeah. She's like, yeah, there's no curse. I'm like, but is it haunted? And she's like, well, I haven't had an experience, but, and I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. So she'd already kind of admitted that it was haunted, right? So as we're leaving, I'm kind of, again, I'm just like attached to her, and because she's just like all this information, and I'm like, do you hear footsteps when we were in there? And she's like, uh-huh. She's like, is there anybody upstairs? What's on the 3rd floor? And she's like, oh, we're going out there right now. There's a couple of offices up there. And I said, oh, okay, so there's people working up there. And she goes, not today. And she pulls the key out of her pocket and looks at me, and I'm like, so we go upstairs, and I'm like, here we go. Now, upstairs hasn't been hardly touched at all for the restoration. It's all original. The wood is original. This is the original nun quarters. This is where they slept when it was first built. They didn't have doors or windows on the lower levels because it cost money. So the top level was where all the action was. Mm-hmm. So we go upstairs, and every haunting story that you look at from the academy is you're either hearing footsteps from upstairs, much like me, or hearing footsteps from the 3rd floor, or something happens on the 3rd floor, and you feel uncomfortable, and people bail out. Okay, so I'm like, haunted 3rd floor, let's go. So immediately it becomes apparent to me that, well, this was their personal quarters. It makes sense that if, you know, any part of this building is going to be active by the previous inhabitants, it would be, you know, where they slept and were and was not open to everybody else. So then I start really getting into this and just like, you know, she's a wealth of knowledge. She's showing me, here's what you could see on the joins where the addition happened. And she knows I'm into the construction of the building because my dad was into construction. So she's giving me like the extra like geeky tour. And Dave's with me, and he's just like, is it hot up here? No, it's February in an attic, in a brick building, in a rainy part of the world. So no, it wasn't hot up there. And he's like, man, I don't feel good. Like, check it out. Like, I'm all swelled up. And he's trying to pull his wedding ring off, and it won't budge. He's like, I don't feel good. Maybe we can go down and go to the bathroom. I'm going to go back downstairs. He's like, take your time. I know you're having fun. Like, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Like, you know, I'm like, okay, I'll come check on you in a few minutes. So he bails and goes downstairs, and I finish all my stuff. So I get back downstairs, and I find him down there chilling. I'm like, you all right? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine now. Look, ring's fine. Like, I feel fine. I just felt, it's really weird up there. I don't like it up there. And I was like, oh, really? Like, I wanted to sleep there. Yeah. Like, there was this old desk by this window, and I was like, I want to sit here at this desk and look out this window for about 3 hours and just watch. Yeah. I, again, irrationally attached to this place. Not the first hidden brick building I've been into. So I'm like, okay. So I start digging into this haunting more. Everybody that's had experiences on the 3rd floor. The other big haunting story is from when the laundry building was used in the 1970s after the school was closed, and it was sold to a private party. It was used as a haunted house. So a bunch of students from Clark College worked there, dressed up in creepy makeup, and scared the crap out of people that paid to come in there and get the crap scared out of them. Right. So, okay. There's your haunting, right? So that's, you know, makes you think, is that part of the haunting of that building? It's just residual, whatever. But the real story is what happened to the performers when they were done, because they were given permission to go across the street and stay at the academy and stay up in the old nun quarters and, you know, whatever. Oh, and they had a real bad time, a real bad time. So if you think about this, what happened on the third floor? Nun quarters. Dudes aren't supposed to be up there. Dudes have a bad time. You're not supposed to be goofing off up there. That's not what it was designed to do. The building's just doing what it's designed to do. And there's this whole other story about the haunted bell in that building. It's a really sad story. It was removed when, again, the academy was sold in the 60s to a private party. And they brought it back when the Hiddens, Robert Hidden, saved the academy and several other buildings from destruction, despite being mocked by his family and the local press for being the most sentimental man in the world and having his money pitched. His own family said that about him, right?
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
He was the only one that kept the brick company going, that kept any of this going. As soon as he died, the brick company shut down. They said it was Dad's hobby. It didn't matter, you know. So he's really the last brick guardian that really did anything. So you go back down to Robert and you think about Robert's gone. His kids, one of his sons is already dead. The other one isn't really involved with anything. The bricks need new guardians. The bricks need new guardians. So I keep digging into this in the academy because I'm like, why am I so into this building? And I find out synchro after synchro after synchro. I found out the farm that fed the academy is literally next to another haunted shop where I worked for several years. This one was a much more dangerous haunting. It was down on Fruit Valley Road, and things happened there like forklift brakes would give out, oven parts would explode. Like, it was literally dangerous. And I would stage that place constantly, and the dudes that I worked with would make fun of me, and I would stop, and then they would beg me to start doing it again because we'd have so many problems. So, and I never thought about it, but the shop that I worked on was on La Framboise Road, which means raspberry in French. Oh. So, you know, again, here's the nun. Here's the nun. Oh, look, here's the nun. Oh, look, here we are again. And it's just like again and again and again. Also, that same shop is within 4 blocks of a really terrible story that also involves the Hidden family that has to do with a double suicide about a local bank that's haunted.
Oh, my goodness.
So this is all, like, I'm surrounded by this stuff. And I'm like, clearly something's happening.
Right.
So 4 blocks from the shop, there's this terrible, terrible block. I call the whole block the most tragic in Vancouver because there's just been so many terrible things that happen around the old 6 on Main in Vancouver. But the big one that got my attention is this Charles Brown house. Charles Brown was a banker who he and his assistant over about 9 years embezzled tens of thousands of dollars, which is insane money back there, including the Hidden family fortune. Hidden initially defended him in the newspaper. He's my friend. He would never do this. Well, guess what? Homeboy did it. So he and his friend went by his house to say goodbye. His house is also haunted and has hidden links. It's also the oldest house in Vancouver.
Oh, my
and then
goodness.
they went out to 26 in Kaufman, which is within 3 blocks of that shop, and shot themselves. So is that related to all the crappy stuff at the shop? I don't know.
Right.
So it's all again and again and again and again. And the Charles Brown house is a block up from this other church that we can talk about later if you want to, called the 1912 First Presbyterian Church, which is pretty much the opposite of the academy. Like, it's a lesson in opposites. Aside from that, a block the other direction from this house is another haunted house. It's actually a funeral home now. And I did a custom powder coating job there when I worked at the same shop and talked to the guy at length about the haunting there. So something has been trying to get me on that block for at least a year.
Right.
Like, there are multiple things that happen to put me in that vicinity, and I never paid attention to that church. I never paid attention to, you know what I mean? Like, and they're like, I keep being sent back there. And that's why whenever you really start to want to interact with the paranormal or anything strange, you need to document it. You need to write it down, because this stuff's like a grenade. These little things that happen that are strange need to be noted with the date, what happened, why it got your attention. Write it down and forget about it. Months and months and months and months and months later is when kind of the patterns emerge. And so if you don't recognize or even document it, and not every weird thing that happens is going to be a synchronicity, right? But if you have something that makes you pause enough to go, what is happening? Like, why am I back on this block a 5th time this year for something random? Start paying attention, right? People want to go interact with ghosts and whatever, and it's like, think about how much energy it takes for someone on the other side to actually talk to you. Wouldn't it be easier to sort of like hack your own system and give you hints or ideas or show you patterns or, if your own God's providence signs, what I mean? It's all the same kind of stuff. So we need new keepers for the bricks, is my theory, is what's going on. Because they were so important and they're so engraved in the city that nobody's paying attention. On top of that, the outbuildings at the academy are threatened.
Yeah.
So if you're a nun that really is into witchy stuff, like she seems to be, and you're working with the Masons and you're doing some kind of hidden magic stuff, literally hidden magic stuff, you're known for fighting the city, literally, against injustice. And then they're going to, 22 years after you die, they're going to knock down your buildings that you built as a reflection of God's love for a development deal. That's shady. What would you do? You'd probably try to get someone's attention. So what kind of people would you want to pay attention to you? Well, somebody that probably gives a crap about females and women's issues and equality and things like that, and probably somebody that would be interested enough in bricks to, give a crap about saving some crusty old buildings, and maybe somebody that might, remind you of yourself in some sort of a way. And maybe they should just find the only one that I've ever seen, aside from the one that's in the wall at the academy and the one that's in the Providence Archives in Seattle. I have never seen another one of these brick stuff any other than those two. I talk to brick people all the time. This brick is so incredibly rare. I could not get another one. If I had $500, I probably could not get another one. I almost destroyed it.
Yeah.
But they didn't let me. They let me down this road instead. This is weird. This is weird.
Yes.
So, and again and again and again, I go to her grave and I take random pictures of cemetery, headstones that I think are cool. And 6 months later, I find out the one I took a picture of was the doctor that gave them all medical care at the orphanage.
Oh,
why? Why did I take a picture of the whole cemetery? Why him? Because he loved her. She loved him. They were friends. It was important. Somebody's making me do this stuff. I don't know why or how or what. And then somebody's having me blasted out there too, where people like you are like, ooh, it tracks. And then the people that are into the bricks, the people that I feel are really into the bricks, much like you, I'll offer them a brick. Hey, do you want a brick? Really? And then you get a brick, and then it sort of activates. And here's another part of this situation too. So I probably have between 100 and 150 bricks. I bought 50 bricks specifically to, my plan is I wanted to do some sort of a project to try to get the public interested in these buildings and maybe try to save the outbuildings, and had an opportunity to buy 50 old hiddens from an old guy who I now call my brick dad. It's hilarious. He's become my brick friend, and he's the one that he geeked out over this so hard that I really realized what I had. Once at that point, he was like, I can't believe you have that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I buy these 50 bricks from him, and my thought was I'm going to, restore them all. They'll have mortar that needs to be soaked off and whatnot, and was going to use them to try to either as a perk or something for people that are interested in bricks and want to help try to save them. Or I don't know. I just bought these 50 bricks and figured I'd know what to do with. And slowly but surely I've been, as people that show interest, I'll just part with one. And it seems like every brick that I get rid of, I go to one of these haunted places and there's a hidden brick in the alley, loose outside, in the streets.
Yeah.
I've been gifted bricks at First Presbyterian Church, half a brick there. 3 from the Providence Academy on separate occasions.
Oh, my goodness.
1 at the Slocum House. That's the one that, if you guys follow me on Twitter, I'm calling it pee brick. Because it was out back of the house, and my husband's like, that brick's probably been peed on. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. And I took it home, and I'm trying to clean it up. And, yeah, it's pretty much, I'll get there, but, yeah, it pretty much was peed on. I don't know if it's dogs or human or whatever. But anyway, so, like, I'm insane. I'm picking up bricks full of pee in parks, okay? Like, something is happening. I don't even know.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what's happening? Is it the bricks themselves? Is it the bricks themselves? So I started looking into the bricks. Like, what about this is different? Well, how it's made is different because they were made all handmade. That's one of the things that Robert Hidden was known for and why he kept his brickyard clear through his death. They made fun of him because they said it was his hobby, but all of those, these are mud bricks. These are old mud bricks that are dried in the air, and then they are put in a kiln and turned in front of a fire. There's no wire cut marks on the back. They're all handmade, hand-turned. There's a lot of energy. These are handled by people.
Yeah.
He was the only one in the 90s that still made mud bricks this way. So his stuff was in demand for historical restorations on the West Coast. He did it as a service because not only was he a member of the local historical preservation committee, which is why he managed to save so many of these buildings. We would have nothing if it wasn't for Robert Hidden. There would be none of these buildings left.
Wow.
You know? So he kept this brickyard so he could essentially provide materials for all the other historic buildings on the West Coast. It was a labor of love. It wasn't out of money. So that's all gone now. So again, if it's all these structures are crumbling, falling apart, need all this money to be restored, and all these people are now getting interested in bricks again. Is it the bricks talking? Is it because they were made in a time where everything was so full of wild potential? It's like they're like a snapshot. They're a battery. They're steady. They're strong. They're still here. And like we talked about, if you think about what's happening right now, why wouldn't something like a brick be wanting to give us lessons and be wanting to connect with us in a time where we are literally finding our own connections and rebuilding our own structures as a whole? I think for all of these reasons, bricks are just becoming a thing. And it's not just us.
No.
Like people are digging up, like I get tagged in brick stuff all the time on Twitter now. People know I'm into bricks. So I see it all the time. Even Elon Musk is making bricks right now. Boring bricks. That's what he called them. Boring bricks. Boring bricks versus hidden bricks. There's an article in Popular Mechanics about how bricks, they figured out bricks can hold quantum energy, and they're going to start maybe powering homes with them.
Oh, my goodness.
Bricks.
Right.
Everywhere, all the time.
Yeah.
It's just a symbol. I think it's just one symbol that we've been noticing and paying attention to and chasing. Because things like this are happening all over with birds, with moths, with, you know, whatever it is. Something is happening. And so if you really think about what a haunting is, you know, why are these buildings still, you know, talking back? And it's a combination of what I think is residual and what I would call, you know, an intelligent response. But if you examine now the energy that's around all day, all the time, in the whole entire world, like everything is panic and everything, again, has wild potential.
Yes.
Yeah. But the bricks are still here. They're still steady. They're still strong. They're still doing our job. You can still use them. You just have to take care of them, rebuild them, and restore them if things aren't right. That's another thing that's happening. I'm seeing patterns of opposites and parallels that have to do with systems falling, things falling, and being rebuilt. And maybe one of the other lessons that they have to teach us is so many of these buildings were raised in the 1960s, all the ones that Robert tried to save and couldn't. And now, all the buildings built in their place, the concrete and whatever monstrosities are starting to fail too. So maybe taking from what in the past is worth keeping. And, you know what I mean? You could get really philosophical about this if you think of a brick as like a symbol.
Yeah.
So
because
maybe
we
they
talked
are
about
haunted.
Yeah, in that sense, yes. I think so. I mean, yesterday we talked about, everything that we knew in the before times. So much of that is gone, and I think people have been kind of holding their breath, waiting to get back to normal, and we're starting to understand that is not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Things have changed so much in the last, 8 months?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And, the world that we lived in before, it's no longer, it's changed. It's not going to go back to the way it was. And I think that, yes, a lot of us are being seriously challenged to look at where we are and where we are going. And we have to kind of, restructure our lives and restructure our expectations and our goals based on this new world that we're living in. Rather than putting everything on hold and just waiting for things to go back. It's like, no, we're here now. We're going forward into this world, and you have to decide what you're going to make of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And make your connections.
Yes.
Pay attention to your patterns. Find your tribes.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so hard, because everything seems so overwhelming. But if everybody just concentrated on their little pocket, we'd all be all right.
Yeah.
So if you think about where most of these remaining buildings were caused, or were the cause for them being built, schools, orphanages. First, Washington State School for the Blind is still here. It's famous, world famous.
Wow.
Hidden built it himself. There was a spirit of community and caring and purpose involved. The entire brick company started with her purpose, what she felt was her purpose, to show the poor and infirm and the ill God's love through care. So if they're trying to knock down your building and that's why you built it, yeah, I think that would probably get your attention if you were a rebellious nun from the 1800s who didn't, listen to arbitrary rules or let men tell her what to do or let people bully her around. And there's corruption involved with the development deal, which there absolutely is. That's a lot of energy. That would, because that's the thing that makes me so crazy about these modern ghost shows is, they'll show up and they'll set up a light grid and have a flashlight and they'll be like, can you tell me, how did you die? Now, if Mother Joseph from 120 years in the past who's been dead is going to come back and talk to you, do you think she's going to want to talk about her suffering as she lied there and died of cancer? Or do you think she's going to try to get your attention with some bricks and be like, hey, something's going on here, and start to have strange synchronicities about bricks and have people start paying attention to hidden bricks? Because when you start paying attention to hidden bricks, it's all linked to her, which is why I ended up getting a tattoo of what I thought the bricks should really look like.
Oh, you did? I didn't know this.
Oh yeah, I do. I'll send a photo to you later. It's still in process, but it has hidden brick dust mixed in the ink as well.
That's awesome.
And I'm working on completing a leg sleeve, but I have it's in process. But I believe not only should some of the bricks say hidden, I believe some of them should say mojo.
I agree with you there. Yes, absolutely.
So I have a tattoo of bricks, one that says hidden and one immediately underneath it that says mojo, which is what I really believe. Because without her, none of this would have happened.
Right. Right.
And Vancouver's just one town. She founded Walla Walla. She founded Spokane. She's responsible for the first hospital in Seattle. She built hospitals in BC. She's responsible for Great Falls, Montana. She was everywhere. Just one woman.
Yeah, I mean, she has like this otherworldly essence about her. Like, how did you do all this in one short lifetime? You know? But she did somehow.
Against insurmountable odds.
Yes.
Again and again and again and again. And the stories are just hilarious. Like, she just had no fear. And one of the things, this is really interesting, she was so incredibly humble much like the bishop that was pulled out of the church when he was disinterred and he was perfect, like the Catholics wanted to announce, oh, miracle here, we got a miracle in Vancouver.
Yeah.
All of the family and all of the people that knew him said, no, he wouldn't want it.
Mm-mm.
He wouldn't want it.
Wow.
He's too humble. Now, this is little Eddie, okay? This is her homie.
Right.
So she was the same way. She was not a big letter writer. There's under 10 letters that she's written in existence. There's under 5 photographs of her in existence. She was just too busy.
Mm-hmm.
And they said in the official annals, of Mother Joseph's intimate intercourse with God, she said little. Were it not for copies of letters to her superiors, the only way her spiritual life would have been known to us is only in an external manifestation. Her power in intercessory prayer was the weapon which she combated all difficulties, but the spiritual warfare waged over her own soul was the perpetual source of the hidden power which she renewed unceasingly at the expense of her strong nature.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what's going on, but I'm trying to find out.
Yeah, I think there's layers to it. I think it kind of seems to be revealing itself in pieces. The more we connect with each other and the more the bricks find their people. And I think when we were talking yesterday, too, and you talked about the other church, the crumbly church, and you mentioned that the problem was that the bricks were baked for too long because they liked the color. And I thought about what we're all experiencing right now with different levels of stress and, some buckling under the pressure of it. Mm-hmm. And it's such a simple thing, but I think it's so easy to forget that if you stew in the stress for too long, it's easier to become fragile. And I think, there's so many things that we're learning, but I think in this time we're all learning that it's so important to just pause and allow yourself to just be, because we're not going to have the answers. And we're also learning how to be okay with not knowing. And that's a hard thing, especially I come from a religious background where it's like you have the answers. You knew this, and this, and that was just what it was. And yet here's Mojo, who also comes from a religious background, who seemed very okay with not knowing because she knew she would know what she needed to know when she needed to know it, and she'd know how to progress, how to move forward.
And had a remarkable life that was touched by synchronicity as a result.
Right. And so it's that question of being open to knowing what you need to know right now and trusting yourself enough to know that what you know now is enough. And that seems like such a simple and basic thing, but it's not something we're accustomed to at all.
Right. So you can even think of it as faith. Yeah. Again, depends on the lens.
It depends on the lens, 100%. Yep.
Yeah. I wanted nothing to do with the Catholic stuff either. It's coming for you. There was a guy on Twitter. There's a gentleman on Twitter named J Hulme, Hulme. Sorry if I screwed up your name, Jay. That I started following. He posts cathedral tours, and I got super into churches right around the same time, or super into bricks around the same time he got super into churches. And he is, he's a trans man, and he's having a very similar experience that we are going, or at least I am going, circling back to old faith again. And it's like, I didn't want this. What is happening? Right. I don't understand this. And there was an article in line in his most recent thing where he called the wife of a pastor and he said, oh my God, I think Jesus is coming for me. What the F do I do? And I started just laughing hysterically because it's like, the nuns are coming. What do I do? What do I do? Like, and they really are coming for me. Like, it's really personal, and I don't have a clue what's happening. But the great thing is that it's happening.
Right.
That's it. That's why we watch the ghost shows, and that's why we go look for Bigfoot, and that's why we go think about aliens. And we like to have things that aren't explained around. It connects us with a sense of mysticism and awe and a sense of something other,
Yeah. When I finished the second season of Hellier, I had such a strong emotional response to the ending of it, and I tried to figure out what it was, and it was like I was grieving the loss of something. It wasn't because I was sad the season was over. Greg and Dana are around. Everybody involved is around. They're still doing stuff. But I think what that series might have started for a lot of people, because a lot of the people who are brick people are also Hellier people. Right. So there's the connection there. I think a lot of what it started for people is that longing to connect to something out there. But for some of us, I think what I was grieving was that I had been given this idea of a higher power or whatever that was so incredibly limited. And it was sad to see that we settle for so very, very little when there's so much more out there.
That's brilliant.
There's so much more. And there's a fear about falling in love with the mystery, but then once you do, it's like whole new worlds open up.
Right.
You know?
And that reminds me, again, back to Tenny, and I know I'm like a giant Tenny fangirl, but honestly, of all the thinkers that are alive right now that are around our age, he's the one that really cracked my brain open. So I will always stand Tenny and always be talking about Tenny because he's just an amazing soul. Yeah. I had a chance to check his, if there's a Tenny lecture online and I could be there, I'm there. So I watched the one at Paranormal a couple weeks ago. And he made a really good point about, he was talking about hauntings and ghosts and similar things that like we're talking about. And I loved the fact that he pointed out, and I'd never really thought of it this way, being alive is literally the most liminal of states we're ever going to have. Whatever you believe, if you believe we came from God or heaven or whatever, or came from the ether or are recycled and come back as something else, being alive is literally the shortest, strangest, weirdest experience we're going to have, that literally anything can happen. I mean, if you're a ghost and you're just floating around, like that's in theory going to be, if time is as linear as we think, you know, that could just go on forever. You get the rest of your life to be dead. So even if it's hard right now, even if it's hard to be alive, and even if it's weird, and even if it doesn't make any sense, and even if it sucks, just know it's gonna, this too shall pass. Like, you know, we've heard that a million times, but it's true. Like, enjoy it for what it is, even if it's terrible. That's all we can do.
Yeah, I mean, so many of the experiences we have in life, everything we experience in life is transient. There is nothing, you know, and again, I think that because of so many things that have happened this year, we're really beginning to understand in a very real way how transient that is, because there's this idea that we're given that you're going to reach a point in your life where everything's going to be great. You're going to have the job you want, the income you want, the family you want, and so forth. And, you know, if you're somebody who's been through some stuff, you know how quickly that can go away. Yeah. It just takes one catastrophe and everything you thought you had is gone. So yes, there is something to be said for fully embracing the transient nature of our existence and really understanding that good or bad, whatever you're going through, it doesn't last. And really dig into, you know, staying here in the moment rather than looking back or looking too far ahead, because you don't know what lies ahead. And what's done is done. You can't change that. Right. You can only change how you're responding to that. You know, I think that's a lesson that a lot of people are really starting to learn, unfortunately, for some, maybe for the first time. And they just were not prepared for this at all. And it's been really hard for some people.
Yeah. I don't think anybody's had an easy time this year, for sure.
No. And I also think it's really interesting that the way the bricks and everything surrounding the bricks is, you know, the way they're speaking to people, it's like different for everyone. And it, again, that points, to me, it points to, you know, whatever is out there, we don't have to define it. It doesn't have to be defined by our religion or a set of, you know, theological beliefs or a doctrine, because it speaks to people in different ways, whatever it is. Yeah. And I really firmly believe that as long as you are living your life by the code of don't be an asshole, you're fine.
Yes. Yes. You know? Like that, I literally have a cross stitch in my house that says that.
Oh, how funny.
With a rainbow on it.
That's like my guiding light. Like, just what should I do here? Well, whatever it is, don't be an asshole.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love it.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
This is fun. This is a lot of fun. And, I said yesterday, and I'm saying it again, I do want to revisit this again in a few months because I do think that we're going to see a lot more stuff unfold, and it doesn't have to be relegated to spooky seasons.
For a couple of reasons. Here's kind of like a little sneak preview of the current unfolding. I don't know. Twitter's such a, like it seems like I see the same 10 people on Twitter for a week and then I don't see them for 2 months. And, so I don't know how much of my stuff you've seen and not seen. So, Bricks actually crossed over into Hellier. It's happened.
They did.
It's happened. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And then essentially, to make a try to make the story short. I have one of the friends that's in the Paranormal Museum, which I am, that's Craig and Dana's group.
Yeah.
In there now. She lives in Somerset, which of course is Hellier land, right? There was a well in Hellier that was mentioned, a brick well, and supposedly if you drink the water, like it has, miracle protective properties, whatever, the peace well or whatever. Somebody smashed it and busted it up, and there were loose brick pieces everywhere. So I'm about to receive one of those bricks, first of all, and Mr. Greg Newkirk was also extremely interested in receiving one of those Somerset bricks, so he's getting one, but he also expressed some interest in receiving a hidden brick. So there's now a hidden brick in the Traveling Museum.
Oh, how exciting! That's fantastic.
I have not heard from Shay Newkirk since they received their brick. I know they've been super busy doing stuff.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that now there is one directly in their hands.
That's awesome.
That's going to happen.
That is so wild. The way everything circles back around. Because they started all this.
Yeah. So that's why, and when I posted, I was like, because somebody in the museum group had tagged me and was like, oh my God. And they didn't realize that I was already friends with this person, and they'd already offered me a brick. And I've been doing this. When people send me bricks, I send them a hidden back. So I've got an Ohio.
Oh,
and,
okay.
There's a few other, So this person had already reached out to me privately and said, hey, you're never going to believe what happens, and guess what I have for you. But I loved it because, 6 different people in the museum were like, tag Sarah, tag, like everybody thought of me instantly. And she was like, I know. I talked to her. It's fine. But Greg was so into this Hellier brick, and I was like, are you into bricks? Are you into a hidden brick? Have you heard about this? And I posted a picture, and he expressed interest, so I just sent him one.
That's awesome. I love
it. So we'll see. I have a feeling it's going to get a little weirder, but that's what the whole purpose is.
Yeah, and it's weird, the connections people are making, because you were going to go to Paracon this year.
Yeah.
I was going to go this year to my first ever Paracon. And it's just,
yeah,
we would have been there at the same time. It's just weird. It's like, what is going on? I mean, you're all the way across the country. It's not like you're down the road and you're going to be there. You're all the way on the other side. And
I had a friend coming from England to go to Paracon that I was
wild.
It was so funny because I blamed everybody. I was like, I had a HUD list for 2020. This is all my fault. I literally was like, but So maybe next year. We're hoping for August. That'd be good.
Hopefully by August.
But I'm coming. I'm coming for you, Michigan. I'm coming.
I'm ready. We're ready. Yes. Maybe.
Back to the homeland.
Oh, how cool. Well, in Hellier, I remember Greg talking about the old gods are coming back, and it just feels like that's kind of what it is. Like
American gods all over again.
It's like, yes, all the dogma that we have become so entrenched in. It's like, no, this is not where it's at.
Exactly.
So, how exciting.
Exactly. And something about her was extra, extra special because there were no reports of any kind of abuse when she was there and in charge. It all kind of fell apart later. So she didn't, something about her was protective and something about the bricks was protective.
Interesting. Wow. Well, we'll circle back around to go ahead.
Yeah. One of the things that's really interesting about the bricks, I don't know if you have trouble sleeping, I have trouble.
Sometimes.
I have trouble sleeping, and I had another
Yeah.
friend that was having trouble sleeping, and she's been really into these bricks too, and she has the gift of psychometry, so some of these bricks feel more juice to her than others.
Okay.
We started sleeping with one under our beds. It helps.
Really?
I don't know why, but I tell you what, if I sleep with a brick under my bed, I do not dream.
Huh.
But I sleep like a rock.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Wow.
She does too. She's got one under her bed too. I don't know. We're weird.
I think that we have yet to tap into what these bricks are really all about. We're just seeing the very beginning.
Yeah.
And, you know, but we'll revisit this in a few months and see. Well, thanks for hanging with me, and hopefully we got it this time.
Heck yeah.
And thanks to everybody for watching. And this oh, Sarah, did you want to tell people where they can interact with you?
Oh, yeah. I'm always on Twitter. Twitter's my primary crack social media. I'm at brick_mojo on there. I do have a filthy mouth, so please be warned. I was on my best anti-swear behavior during this podcast. I only had 1 or 2 swears. If you're just into brick content and don't give a crap about me, you should go to my Instagram, which is Hidden Brick Mojo. It's all of the bricks as they're being unveiled. I also have a website, a baby website, brickmojo.net, that you guys can check out.
Yep, and I'll include all of that in the description. So thank you again, Sarah, and I'll be in touch. We'll talk soon.
All right,
bye-bye.